I'm not very good with words, but I need to tell what happened. I live alone since my wife passed away 5 years ago, and my days are usually quiet, sometimes even boring. The thing is, something strange is going on next door. Recently, some new neighbors moved in. I didn't talk to them much, just said hello one day when I saw them in the garden. They seemed nice, a young couple with 2 small children. All normal, right? But a week ago, something changed. I started noticing strange movements at night, noises I had never heard before, as if someone was dragging furniture in the wee hours of the morning. One night, while I was in the kitchen preparing my tea before bed, I saw something that chilled my blood. Through my window, which overlooks the garden we share with the house next door, I saw one of the children. He was standing in the dark, looking towards my house. He wasn't moving, just standing there, staring. I thought about going out and asking him if he needed anything, but something in his gaze stopped me. He didn't look like himself. His expression was vacant, almost as if he was asleep with his eyes open. I decided to go to bed, trying to convince myself that it was my imagination playing tricks. But the next day, it happened again, and this time it wasn't just the boy, but the whole family. They were all there, standing in the garden in the dark, looking out my window. They didn't do anything else, they just stood there, staring. This was repeated several nights, and I found it harder and harder to sleep. I began to feel watched, as if they were expecting something from me. 2 days ago, I decided to confront the situation. During the day, I went to their house and rang the doorbell. No one answered. I tried several times, but nothing. I looked out the window and everything seemed normal. There was no sign of disorder or anything that would indicate that something bad was going on. But something told me that all was not well. Last night, things got worse. I saw them again in the garden, but this time something had changed. They weren't just standing there looking towards my house, they were doing something. On the ground in front of them was something that looked like a pile of clothes, but as I looked closer, I realized it was much more than that. It was a person, or what was left of it. I couldn't get a good look, but it looked like couldn't even tell. It was too horrifying. I ran to the phone to call the police, but then I heard a knock on the back door. My heart stopped. I approached slowly, trembling. When I opened it, no one was there. I went back to the window and they were no longer in the garden. Everything was silent, as if nothing had happened. I don't know what to do. I am writing this because I feel something bad is going to happen and I need someone to know. If you are reading this and don't hear from me, please let someone know. Something very bad is happening next door, and I am very, very afraid. I stayed up all night with all the lights on, and every noise made me jump. I don't know how I managed not to scream when, in the middle of the dawn, I heard someone knocking softly on the front door. I approached quietly, not daring to look through the peephole. The silence after those knocks seemed more terrifying than the noises themselves. I stood there, barely breathing, hoping they wouldn't knock again. Hours passed, and with the first ray of light, I plucked up the courage to open the door. No one was there, but on the floor I found a small toy, one of those that the kids next door used to play with in the garden. I picked it up and closed the door quickly, feeling a shiver run down my back. I couldn't stay like this, I had to do something. So I decided I would go talk to the police in person, see if they could at least stop by and take a look. I got dressed and went outside, looking around in case I saw anything strange. Everything seemed quiet, too quiet. At the police station, I told them everything that had happened. The officer who attended to me took note, but I could see in his look that he wasn't taking me very seriously. He said they would send someone later to talk to the neighbors and verify my story. I left feeling somewhat relieved, but the sense of danger did not go away. I went home and locked myself in. Hours passed and I saw no sign of the police. It was beginning to get dark when suddenly the noises started again. But this time they were not coming from the garden. They were coming from the house next door. Muffled screams, banging, things breaking. Something horrible was happening and I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. I called the police again, almost shouting into the phone that they had to come now. I hung up and looked out the window, trying to see something in the house next door. The back door was wide open, and for a moment I thought about going there myself. But then I saw it. The man in the house ran off into the woods behind our houses. looking back as if something or someone was chasing him. Just then, I heard sirens approaching. The police finally arrived and headed straight for the house next door. I stood at the window watching everything. Several officers entered the house and, after a few minutes, brought the woman and children out. They seemed fine, frightened but not physically harmed. There was no sign of the man. One of the officers came to my house afterwards and explained that they had found the house in complete disarray and that the man had fled into the woods. They were organizing a team to look for him. The woman had told them that her husband had been acting strangely and violently lately, and that night he had erupted in a fit of rage. They asked if I could stay with the family that night so they wouldn't be alone. I agreed, although fear still wouldn't let me. I prepared the guest room for them and tried to make them as comfortable as possible. But the atmosphere was tense. We all jumped at the slightest noise. As the night wore on, the tension in the house was palpable. The children were restless, and their mother, though clearly relieved to be away from her husband, was constantly looking toward all the windows and doors, as if expecting to see him appear at any moment. Not long after we all tried to rest, a loud knock on the door startled us all. The children began to cry, and their mother clung to them, her face pale with fear. I approached the door, my heart pounding uncontrollably. Through the peephole, I saw nothing at first, but then a shadow moved. I called the police again, informing them of the situation. They told me to keep the door locked and not to attempt to confront him under any circumstances. The minutes before they arrived seemed like hours, every second a torment of anticipation and fear. Finally, the lights of police cars illuminated the street, and several officers, along with a police dog, headed into the woods behind the house. The search lasted all night. In the meantime, a couple of officers stayed with us, assuring us that we were safe. At dawn, one of the officers who had gone into the woods returned with news. They had found the man, but not as they expected. He was in a clearing in the forest, dead. There were no clear signs of violence on him. It looked as if he had been the victim of a heart attack or something like that. Further investigation revealed that he had been under a tremendous amount of stress and paranoia in the previous weeks, which likely led to his erratic behavior and ultimately his death. The community was shocked by the events, and many, including myself, felt a mixture of relief and deep sadness at how things had ended. The days that followed were difficult. The family next door stayed with me while they sorted out what they would do next. It was a time of healing and reflection. The woman and her children eventually moved to another city to be near family, looking for a fresh start away from the painful memories of that house. As for me, I will never forget that series of terrifying nights. Sometimes, I still look at the house next door, now empty, and feel a shudder at the memory. But I also know that I did what I could to help, and that gives me some comfort. Life has, for the most part, gone quiet again, though the shadow of those events still haunts me on my loneliest nights.